Todd Phillips, the man who gave us 3 Hangover movies, a bunch of random road tripping comedies, and Starsky and Hutch, made a harsh left turn in 2019 when he unleashed Joker on the world. This movie is yet another depiction of what must be DC Comics' most popular villain at this point, only this one's attempting to be more artsy and grounded. It follows Arthur Fleck, a man who has yet to make it as a comedian. Instead, he just lives with his mom, works as a clown, and sees a psychiatrist. He also has a neurological disability that makes him laugh compulsively. It serves as an origin story for a man who notoriously does not have one. Joker shocked me. Now, most movies try to shock you, that's normal and intentional. Most movies shock you because they show you something weird, or they're shockingly good and you thought it would be bad. Some movies have big, stupid M. Night Shyamalan twists. But Joker shocked me for 2 reasons that I'd never really experienced in a theater before. Now, right off the bat, one of the reasons I was shocked was that after leaving the movie, I saw a wave of negative reviews starting for this movie. People didn't like this movie and they were very loudly expressing it. I've seen many different reasons in these reviews for why people didn't like it, and today I'd like to just go over 3 of the most common ones that I saw and why I think they might be wrong. So one of the reasons is that people seem to think that this movie glorifies domestic terrorism or public shootings. I can see where this might come from, especially if you recall the common sentiment around the release of this movie. Most movie theaters had armed security or even police, including the one I was at, because there was so much speculation that malicious actors would be attracted to this movie. But I do believe that the common sentiment stirred up by journalists around a movie should not color the movie itself. It's my belief that this movie doesn't seek to justify bad actors, but to more explore the type of person who can become one. See, at the beginning of the movie, Arthur Fleck is doing everything by the book. He takes care of his mother, he has a job and does it to the best of his ability, he sees a psychiatrist and does everything she says. He's even chasing aspirations of a stand-up comedy career. Arthur's initial crime is in self-defense. As he's getting beaten up for the 2nd time in this film by a group of younger men, he shoots them. Now, sure, he didn't really need to chase the last one down, but you can kind of understand why he didn't think it was a great idea to let him get away either. Arthur didn't commit this crime with the express intent of hurting anyone. He was just minding his business, trying to live his life, when yet another thing tried to make him the butt of a joke. Not only does doing everything right not get Arthur anywhere, but it almost makes it worse. Leading up to the crime, we're in Arthur's shoes, experiencing it with him as he gets beaten up for his wallet, as his boss blames him for getting beaten up, as Randall makes him take a gun that he doesn't want, as he gets fired for having that gun that Randall gave him. But Todd Phillips also puts us in Arthur's shoes when he's humanized. We get to see what he wants and desires in his life. We see him daydreaming, admittedly very, very cringily, about being on The Murray Show. And on this show, what does he dream about? He just wants to be acknowledged and validated. He wants to be praised for the struggles that he's gone through. He finally gets his father figure. This is exactly what Arthur wants at the end of the day. We're also in his shoes as he, very, very cringily, tries to start a connection with a lady in his apartments. Him having these wanton desires that are so starkly contrasting from his reality is very relatable to me. So yeah, I think Todd Phillips goes through quite a length to make sure that we're not looking at Arthur as a malicious person, but rather with sympathetic eyes. We're not really supposed to be watching the first half hour going, man, this Arthur guy's really mean, I wonder what he's gonna do. We're just supposed to understand him despite him being somewhat abnormal. That way, when he does shoot these 3 men, we have no doubt in our mind whether or not he actually was trying to be malicious or if it was in self-defense. We know it's not something he's been fantasizing about or planned in any way. He was even resistant to taking the gun in the first place. Another common criticism I see about this movie comes from the more comic book movie-oriented crowd. It's basically that this movie doesn't resemble actual comic book Joker and shouldn't have been branded as such. On one hand, I tend to agree with this take. In fact, I think one of the bigger issues with this movie is trying to show a more mainstream, especially comic book-oriented audience, a movie that's so cynical, jaded, and features no hero. I'm not going to be a pretentious film bro, but I do think that this film is very far from standard. In a world where audiences are conditioned to watch whatever Marvel puts out or the newest creation from Blumhouse, a movie that aims to make you uncomfortable for its entire duration is much less welcome. On the other hand, I appreciate this though. I understand it as a criticism, but I see the value in shocking an audience by subverting their expectations. I do, however, get kind of confused that people didn't know that this was going to be more artsy and grounded. I mean, if you saw the trailer, you knew it was going to be a little bit different, and I know a lot of people don't watch trailers, But with how much speculation and controversy there was around this movie, I think most people knew going in that there was something up with this movie. It's hard to think that anyone walking in had not seen a single trailer for it. I do think that calling this movie Joker does put the cart before the horse and makes the audience a little bit more primed to dislike Arthur before he even has a chance to be humanized. And probably the biggest criticism I see of this movie is that it's too derivative of Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. I don't really think there's that much validity to this claim, but I think it's the most worth talking about. Yes, De Niro is in all three, and yes, all three feature men who are at the fringes of society. But that's really where the similarities stop. Each of them have their own unique identities. Taxi Driver is a film from the perspective of someone who's pretty unambiguously malicious. King of Comedy's Rupert Pumpkin, yes, that's really his name, is actually funny. He's just unaware of the traditional avenues of becoming a star.
I'm a star!
Taxi Driver's Travis Bickle, yes, that's also really his name, is not intended to be as relatable. You're following someone who is, at least as far as the script is concerned, a racist who came back from war or lied about ever going and became disenfranchised with the world he no longer recognizes. Now, I do understand that there's differences between the script and the final product, namely that the racism in the script is subtext in the final product. The script, written by Paul Schrader and directly referencing John Ford's The Searchers, initially had a black pimp in the role that eventually went to Harvey Keitel, and it called for all three of the victims at the end to be black. Both of these were changed at studio request due to fear of race riots, but as Tarantino points out in Cinema Speculation, it was more likely that they were afraid of looking racist than any actual threat of violence. If you haven't seen The Searchers, it's a classic Western. It follows a man named Ethan Edwards who fought in the Civil War on the side of the Confederacy and lost. Upon his return, his family is killed by Native Americans and 2 women are abducted, and on his quest to return these 2 women, he goes a little bit overboard in getting revenge on the Comanche as his racism takes over, and he loses sight of his initial goal to rescue them. Similarly, Taxi Driver sees Travis Bickle attempting to save a young white woman from sex trafficking. The racism is still throughout the movie, but it's much more subtle. Travis Bickle avoids black men and seems intimidated by them at every avenue. In comparison, Joker sees quite frankly a benevolent man pushed to the point of violence and then be praised for it, accidentally starting a political movement in the process. Travis Bickle and Arthur Fleck differ in that Travis Bickle at the end of the day can be totally functional. While going crazy, Travis Bickle still holds a job, does it well, gets a date with Betsy, although he does make it weird. He socializes with his coworkers, he lives alone and he seems to have been living alone for a while. He seems like he has the potential to be okay, he's just going through something very strange. And at the end of the movie, you get the feeling that he's probably going to be okay after this. Arthur Fleck, in his regular state, cannot fit in. Arthur Fleck is bullied by his coworkers, pushed around everywhere,
Is that part of your new act, Arthur? If your dancing doesn't do the trick, you're just gonna shoot yourself?
and thought he was dating a girl that he wasn't actually even talking to. His whole dilemma is that he can't function normally. He's a victim of childhood abuse, and he has neurological disabilities because of it. That's left him stunted as an adult. It's something beyond his control. His mother is as helpful as she is reliable, which is to say not at all. Arthur Fleck is not pursuing anything out of hate or anger. He's not trying to do something big, as Travis Bickle expresses.
Just want to go out and really do something.
He's just trying to live his life, but he got off to a bad start. There's a very clear contrast between the two. Travis Bickle is trying to do something big, where Arthur Fleck is pushed into it. As the two movies go on, Travis Bickle becomes more lonely and unhinged, slowly becoming a ticking time bomb where the main curiosity becomes which direction will he explode in? Will he use it on Betsy? What about the political candidate? Will he use it to save Iris? Arthur Fleck, during the movie, is just shown support for what he did. It's his only form of success and acknowledgement. Travis Bickle sought out a gun and practiced with it relentlessly. Arthur Fleck was pushed into a gun and barely knew how to use it. It shocks everyone when Fleck decides to kill, but with Bickle, it's expected. Arthur Fleck killing is used for its shock value. You're not expecting that. Where with Bickle, it's not a surprise. You're just wondering who he's going to shoot. When Arthur Fleck chooses to kill again, it's still a shock. Where when Travis Bickle kills, it's a relief. While there might be a lot of similarities, it's all the little details that make an entirely different story. Going back to King of Comedy, It has a very similar plot to Joker, except for two very big differences. In King of Comedy, Rupert Pupkin is actually funny, just for some reason he wants to skip the regular routine of working your way up as a smaller comedian, slowly accruing an audience. Basically, he wants to be one of Joe Rogan's buddies who gets a career without all the regular hard work it takes to make one. Joker's Arthur Fleck is frankly not actually funny, even his mom says so.
Don't you have to be funny to be a comedian?
And the other big giant difference is the tone. King of Comedy is just that, a comedy, and it's a rather fun one at that. It rarely makes you uncomfortable, and it definitely doesn't end with someone getting shot in the head on live television. Frankly, the best way to actually argue that Joker is derivative of Taxi Driver or King of Comedy is to say that it's almost an amalgamation of both. Taxi Driver plus King of Comedy equals Joker. To me, that's plenty of distance to say that it's not copying either of these movies, but rather riffing on both. Besides, haven't we as a society moved past the idea that something being inspired by other things is copying? The thing that shocked me the most, though, about Joker was just how much I related to it. Before I get to my appreciation of this movie, let me just acknowledge really quickly, I understand it's cringy and corny and probably the biggest red flag you could put on yourself to say that you love this movie, but it really opened up my eyes to what movies could do. In order for me to really express what I mean, I have to open up a little bit about myself.
You guys might not know this, but I consider myself a bit of a loner. I tend to think of myself as a one-man wolf pack.
As you can tell from my glasses, I have pretty messed up eyes. I've had messed up eyes since I was born. In fact, they were so messed up that at the earliest opportunity, I had to get corrective surgery so I could learn to walk. And when I did, I had to get 2 corrective surgeries. As well, I had a speech impediment, which thankfully I was rid of by the age of 4 or 5, but this is just to say that socializing for me as a kid was off the table. I was very far behind the starting line. By the time I was in 4th grade, I was already in therapy for depression. My living situation was constantly in flux, as sometimes I lived with my grandma, most of the time I lived with my mom, where we would move over and over as we kept getting evicted. Eventually, we ended up moving to Arizona from California, where, due to circumstances I'm not really at liberty or willing to say, I ended up staying while my mom went back to California. I've never had a father, nor a father figure, and again, I don't want pity or a woe is me campaign, I'm just trying to set the scene for the circumstances with which I saw this movie. I lived alone as a deeply unsocialized man in a state without a single friend nor family member. Most of my life I've been a quiet guy who sometimes gets pushed around but usually not acknowledged at all. So imagine my surprise when I walk into the theater and on the screen is me, someone who felt invisible, someone who didn't really have a great relationship with their mother, someone who maybe didn't have the best childhood and that left them a bit dysfunctional as an adult, someone who was not hateful, someone who was trying to do everything right without hitting the bumpers of life. It felt like someone reached into the feelings that I've had ever since a literal child and put them on the screen in front of me. And one last time, I don't want pity and I know it's cringy. Joker's Arthur Fleck doing everything right and not getting anywhere is an acknowledgement that some people just get dealt a shit hand. Beyond just my own relation to this movie, it's insanely competently made. It's cinematically gorgeous. Todd Phillips exercises his ability to manipulate the audience's emotions like I never knew he could, based just off his Hangover movies. Joaquin Phoenix is a chameleon, as we all know him to be. Even if I didn't see myself on the screen, Joker is just a great piece of art on its own. On a happier note, Joker may unintentionally give you a view to help you move past tragedies in your life instead of ending up like Fleck, Pupkin, or Bickle. The line, "I thought my life was a tragedy but it was actually a comedy," is actually useful. We can live in our tragedies, constantly looking back with anger, hate, resentment, and sadness at the cards dealt to us. But we can also view these things through the lens of theatrical comedy. Isn't it excellent comedy writing to have your protagonist learn that his mother's delusional, he's adopted, and his girlfriend is imaginary all in one swoop? Isn't it silly to be born cross-eyed, have 2 corrective surgeries, and end up with a lazy eye? Being angry and resentful in life usually never leads you anywhere good. The best thing we can do is take ownership of what we can and aim for better. Recently, James Earl Jones passed away, and his story is one of inspiration to me. Born in a very small town, I looked it up, and in 2020 there was 300 people. He was abandoned by his parents and raised by his grandmother. He also was born with a stutter, and despite 25% of stutters being permanent, he outgrew his and became the most famous voice in Hollywood. Not only did he have the most famous voice in Hollywood, but he was a great actor on the big and little screen as well as on stage and theater. He earned more awards and honors than I can even name. James Earl Jones is irrefutable proof that where you come from or where you might be right now does not dictate where you can go or what you can do. The point of this video is just to start a conversation. I by no means think that I have the end all or be all of opinions, and I understand I'm probably pretty biased with my personal experience about Joker. At the end of the day, I just want to have conversations with people about movies, so let's do that in the comments. Also, I did make this video knowing that the sequel is right around the corner. I honestly didn't want anything about the sequel to be able to change how people thought about the first one. If you want to stay up to date with what I'm currently watching, my TikTok and Letterboxd are both Jacob LaFleur. Thanks for watching, guys. Happy Halloween. See you in the next one.